Good morning, everyone, and welcome. Well, good noon to those of you on the East Coast. Welcome to 12 at 12. Today we have Margaret Helthaler, and she's presenting on Brightspace Gradebook Basics, where how to grade and how to use rubrics. And just a reminder that faculty development credit is given by filling out the Google form and the link here in the handout section. This is available for you. And if Margaret has a handout, she could put it in there as well. So I'm going to pass it over to you, Margaret.
Okay. All right, let me get my...
Yep, we're seeing your screen now. Go for it.
Okay, great. Okay, so thanks for joining me today. And just to avoid confusion, I saw on the start screen there you had me as the lead faculty for Media Arts Animation, and that is no longer the case. I'm now the lead faculty for graphic design, so I don't want, if any of my faculty are out there, to be confused. But other than that, today we're going to discuss grading basics. We'll review some grading resources, and we'll discuss the differences between grading in classic courses versus Pinnacle courses. So we're going to begin with the resources, and if you haven't already, I encourage you to pin the Faculty Training Center course to your Brightspace homepage. You can find this course by searching for TRA 200 in your Brightspace course list. And this is an area where you'll find copies of trainings like this, the faculty development trainings, as well as trainings that have been provided on Brightspace and other resources. So I encourage you, if you haven't already, to pin that course and refer to it as needed, because it is a helpful resource. I tend to point faculty to it quite a bit. And once you're in the training center, I encourage you to go to the learning path and type grading in the search box. And this is going to show you all of the course content with the word grading in the title. And I recommend that you watch grading and assignment in a classic course with a rubric, grading workflow for tasks in Pinnacle courses, and grading submissions, otherwise known as milestones, with rubrics. So these three trainings that I have the arrows next to here on the slide go into much more detail on the topics that I'm going to touch on today. We only have 12 minutes, so I'm just kind of going over the highlights, but I recommend you follow up with these recordings if you haven't already seen them to kind of get into the nitty-gritty, step-by-step process of grading, whether you're in a classic course or a Pinnacle course. Okay, so let's take a look at grading in classic courses. Classic courses can be identified by courses that are organized by weeks. So if you go into a class that you've been assigned and you see that the navigation tabs on the home page have weeks in the title, you know that you're teaching a classic course. And classic courses do not include built-in rubrics. So when you're ready to grade student work, you'll need to navigate to the assignment instructions and copy the grading rubric, just like we're very familiar with doing when we were teaching in e-college. It's basically the same process. So then you go to the grade book and you click on the arrow next to the assignment name and select grade all. This is the step that you want to follow to grade in the classic course. And then you can click on the submission icon that's in the submission column to open the submission view. Now, there's other ways of navigating to this area. You can actually, when you're in the discussion thread, click on the arrow next to the student name and select Assess Student, and it's going to bring you into the same view, the submission view, which is going to show you both the student submission as well as their comments in the thread, so you can evaluate their work as well as their participation in this window. And once you do that, you want to click on the area to expand the feedback window to make it larger. You click on the little arrow there that's pointing in all the different directions. And that's where you're going to paste the grading rubric into the feedback window once you've expanded it there so you can see everything. And I like to do this as I go along. I know back in e-college it was very easy to kind of paste the rubrics into all of the feedback fields for the students and then go back and evaluate. I find it easiest to just have the grading rubric copied on my clipboard and paste it in as I go along and respond to student work in the grade book. So again, you would paste the rubric in, and then you would want to complete the rubric by showing points earned out of possible points and add whatever comments you're going to make. And then when you're finished, you enter the score in the top right, and you want to make sure you select Publish, or else the students won't be able to see what you're doing. So you select Publish, and then you save, and you can move on to the next student. So those are the basic steps. Now, note when you publish your comments in the submission view, the grade and the feedback will automatically populate the grade book. Excuse me. Now, you could also just use the submission view for reference and enter the feedback and the score in the grade book directly. It's a matter of preference. Excuse me. Now, if you've conducted outreach and you've documented the outreach, in the gradebook feedback area like you're supposed to, this is the approach that you should take so that you don't overwrite your outreach documentation. It's important to note that whenever you're in the submission view and you publish and save what you've entered in that feedback area, is going to overwrite whatever you have here. So I only use these steps that I had just shown you in terms of grading work in the submission view the first time I go in to grade an assignment before I know whether students are late or not. And then I'll reach out to the missing students if it's the first time they've missed an assignment, and I'll document it here in the feedback area. There won't be anything here to click on because they haven't submitted anything. But then when I go back, and I'll give them a 0 because the grade was due, but then when I go back, if they've submitted the work, I make sure that I go into this feedback area and paste the rubric above the outreach that I documented, and then enter the grade here directly so that I'm not overwriting my outreach. It's important to show that, excuse me, that you've reached out to students the first time that they've missed an assignment. Now, some rubrics in classic courses do not include criteria that make it easy to evaluate the overall quality of a project. So some of our older rubrics aren't as effective as they could be. So to avoid grade inflation, I encourage you to use the scale shown here to determine points earned. For example, in this rubric, the activities associated with the assignment are worth 90 points. So if a student submitted average work, you would multiply 90 by 75, because you can see on the scale here that 0.75 is the equivalent of average work. And so this would give you a 67.5 for the points earned, and you can round up if you wish to. And then when you're entering the information in the rubric, it's helpful to include the descriptive word associated with the skill level. Otherwise, 68 out of 90 points means very little to the student, at least most students. If they're anything like me, I'm number illiterate for some reason, and numbers don't mean anything to me. So 68 out of 90, I'd have no idea what that meant in terms of the skill level that I had demonstrated. But if you add the word satisfactory, that clarifies things. Students have an idea of what satisfactory means compared to excellent or very good or needs improvement. They have an idea of where they're falling and what they need to do to improve. So I encourage you to include those descriptive words. Or the letter grade equivalent if you'd prefer to do that. I like to use the descriptive words just to clarify what the points mean. Okay, so now let's take a look at grading in Pinnacle courses. Pinnacle courses can be identified by courses that are organized by milestones. So if you go into a class that you've been assigned to and you see the milestone titles on the tabs here, you know that you're teaching a Pinnacle course. Now, most Pinnacle classes will include built-in rubrics. Some of the early conversions may not, so you do want to check to see if they're there. A quick way to see if the built-in rubrics are present is to click on the Tools menu on the home page and select Rubrics. And if built-in rubrics are present, you're going to see them listed on the rubrics page. Now, faculty are expected to use the built-in rubrics when they're provided, so you want to make sure you check to see if the class that you're teaching has the built-in rubrics. I know I've noticed that a number of my faculty are missing this because of the process that they use to grade. They simply don't see that assessment column, and they don't know that there are built-in rubrics that they can use. And it makes things a whole lot easier if you use the built-in rubrics. And also, the rubrics are a lot better than than some of the older rubrics used to be. Now, the steps for grading tasks and milestones are slightly different. We're going to begin with tasks. When you're ready to grade a task, you want to go to the grade book and select Grade All from the drop-down menu next to the task name. Same steps that you took when you were grading in a classic course thus far. However, the difference is when you're grading a task, you can use the submission view to review student work, but you need to click on the assessment icon in the assessment column to open the grading rubric. That's where the actual grading has to occur. You cannot grade in the submission view when you're in a Pinnacle course that has built-in rubrics. Now, the other thing to keep in mind is you want to make sure that you click on a value for each criterion in the built-in rubric. You can manually adjust the score if you wish after you've selected a value. As you see here, I selected 3.45 as the value, and then I manually adjusted the score because I wanted it to be 3, and I explained it here in terms of how I evaluate participation. But it's important to actually click on that value, not just enter a number here. Otherwise, the system will not view the rubric as complete, and the results may not display correctly for the student. So be sure to select a value for each criterion when you're using the built-in rubrics. You can always make adjustments if you need to after the fact. Now, to grade milestones, you want to select submissions under Instructor Tools. Now, you can also navigate to the submissions view in the gradebook, just as you did in grading a task, where there's the submission column. But this is another way that you can just go directly to the milestone submissions. So you would select the milestone you wish to grade, and then you would click on Evaluate for the first submission, and this would bring you into that submission view that you would get to if you had double-clicked on the icon next to the student name for the assignment in the gradebook. So here you can view the submission by clicking on the, downloading the file or viewing the file that the student uploaded, or, reading what they had wrote and that sort of thing. And then you want to click on the grading rubric under Evaluation, and there's also a little icon there. It's not pictured in this slide, but either one, the link or the icon, will get you there. So you open the grading rubric, and here too, you need to make sure that you click on a value for each criterion. Again, you can manually adjust the score if you want to use a different score than what's built into the rubric, but a value needs to be selected in order for the system to recognize that the rubric's been completed. So let's say here that I wanted to make this 8 points instead of 7.9 for some reason. I could come in here and I could, click on this little tool here to adjust these points manually. Also, once I make the selection for the value in this rubric, that's when you get the little pencil that you can click on and add written notes. So that's how you would add feedback to the rubric directly in the, rubric in the submission view for milestone submissions. Now, in both tasks and milestones, you can add comments to the rubric, or you can add them separately in the feedback window. Now, in the submissions, this is what the feedback window looks like. It's, on the side here, you can see here, this is just a pull out from what you're seeing over here. Or, the actual feedback column in the gradebook for tasks. So either works. So this concludes my quick overview of grading basics. I know I kind of went through it quickly. Again, we only had about 12 minutes. So I would encourage you to take a look at the training videos in the Training Center for more detail. Doug Barkey does a recording, kind of walks you through all of the steps for the recommended workflow for grading under in these different kinds of courses, and whether it's a task or milestone or a classic course. So I encourage you to take a look at it. You'll know that he also has a video here on how to create a grading rubric of your own. So if you are teaching a classic course and you teach it often and you'd like to set up a rubric that you can just kind of click off and not have to do the copy and paste, that's also an option. You can watch that recording to learn about that as well. So that is all that I have for you today. Ellen, I'll send it back to you.
Wonderful. Amazing detail. Thank you. And I'll have, maybe if you don't mind, a copy of this presentation that we can include with the training for people.
Sure, I'll email it to you.
Wonderful. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Thank you, Margaret. Excellent information for us.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Take care.
See you next week.